It's over, Elena.
Elena Archer, federal warrant. Hands where I can see them.
Will, please, we can fix this.
Every plan.
The text message glowed on Elena's tablet like a neon sign advertising my humiliation. Can't wait for tonight. C. I stood in our kitchen at 11:30 p.m., holding her forgotten device while she was supposedly showing a house to late-night buyers. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 15 years of marriage, I'd become the late-night buyer of my wife's lies. Will? Elena's voice drifted from the front door, followed by the sound of heels clicking on hardwood. She was laughing, that musical sound that used to make my chest tight with love. Now it just made me nauseous. I set the tablet exactly where I'd found it and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Elena breezed into the kitchen, her blonde hair slightly mussed, lipstick gone, reeking of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "How was the showing?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She barely glanced at me while rifling through her purse. Exhausting. These buyers were so demanding. Wanted to see every closet, every corner. She pulled out her phone, fingers already flying across the screen. I'm beat. I bet. Must be hard work, all that showing. Something in my tone made her look up. Elena had always been sharp. It's what made her such a successful real estate broker, and such a convincing liar. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just wondering if you forgot something tonight. Or just forgot me entirely. Her green eyes narrowed. Don't start, Will. I'm tired, and I don't need your passive-aggressive bullshit right now. Passive-aggressive? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Elena, I found your tablet. Saw the message from C. For just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw panic flicker across her face before she recovered, transforming it into indignation. You went through my personal things? It was sitting right here, screen up. Hard to miss. She snatched the tablet, clutching it to her chest like a shield. That's Colin Brandt. He's a client. We're working on finding him a bigger place for his business. At 11 p.m. on a Tuesday? Some people work late, Will. Some people have ambition. The words were sharp, designed to cut. Not everyone's content punching a time clock at the mill for 20 years. There it was, the real Elena. The one who'd grown to despise my steady job, my predictable life, my complete devotion to her. I'd been a small-town investigative journalist once, before the paper folded and I took the supervisor job at the mill to keep us afloat. Elena used to say she was proud of me for being practical. Now she wielded that practicality like a weapon. So this is about my job now? This is about you being paranoid and going through my stuff. She moved toward the stairs, but I stepped into her path. Elena, I know you're lying. She stopped, tilting her head with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate. You know what, Will? You're right. I am lying. I've been seeing Colin for 3 months. We're in love, and I'm leaving you. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. No tears, no apologies, no acknowledgement of 15 years together. Just cold, brutal honesty delivered with a smile. Just like that? Just like that? She stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne stronger now. You want to know the truth? You're boring, Will. You're predictable and small and forgettable. Colin makes me feel alive again. What about our marriage? What about it? We've been roommates for years. At least now we can stop pretending. She pushed past me toward the stairs. I'll get my things tomorrow. Stay out of my way. I listened to her heels clicking up the stairs, heard the bedroom door slam. 20 minutes later, she came back down with a suitcase, car keys jingling. Elena, wait. She paused at the front door, looking back with something that might have been pity. Will, you need to understand something. You'll end up alone because that's what you deserve. No one will ever be on your side. You're just nothing. The door slammed behind her, leaving me standing in my own house feeling like a ghost. I was still standing there 10 minutes later when I heard the back door creak open. Heavy footsteps crossed the kitchen, and my father appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grim. "Saw her leave with the suitcase," Frank Archer said, settling into a kitchen chair like he owned the place. At 72, he was still built like the mill worker he'd been for 40 years. Broad shoulders, thick hands, and eyes that missed nothing. "She's gone, Dad." "Good. That woman's been poisoned for years. You were just too blind to see it." I wanted to argue, to defend Elena out of habit, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I slumped into the chair across from him. She said no one would ever be on my side. Dad's laugh was harsh. "She's wrong about that, boy. Dead wrong, and before this is over, she's going to find out just how wrong she is." The next morning brought a hangover I'd earned with a bottle of bourbon and a clarity I hadn't expected. Elena's words echoed in my head, boring, predictable, nothing, but instead of crushing me, they were starting to piss me off. I called in sick to the mill and drove to the boathouse, the kind of dive bar that opened at 10 a.m. for people who needed to forget their problems or plan their revenge. My old friend Frankie Torres was already there, nursing a beer and reading yesterday's newspaper. "Jesus, Will, you look like hell." Elena left me. I slid onto the adjacent bar stool and signaled the bartender. "Whiskey. Make it a double." Frankie folded his paper, giving me his full attention. We'd been friends since high school, and he'd spent 20 years as a cop before retiring early on disability. He knew when to listen and when to talk. For who? Colin Brandt, that tech guy with the fancy car and the glass house on Elm Street. Ah, shit. Frankie shook his head. "I know Colin. Pulled him over twice for speeding in that Tesla of his, arrogant prick. Talks to cops like we're his personal servants." The whiskey burned going down, but it felt good. "She said I was nothing, Frankie. Boring and predictable and nothing." Elena always was a cold bitch. Remember your wedding? She spent the whole reception networking, handing out business cards to the guests. I did remember. I'd thought it was charming then, my ambitious wife, always working. Now it felt like a preview of the next 15 years. "You know what really kills me?" I found her tablet last night, saw the message from him. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it, just threw it in my face like I should be grateful for her honesty. Some women are like that. They want to twist the knife while they're stabbing you. The bar door opened, and Mrs. Derry shuffled in. At 85, she was the town's unofficial gossip network, and her presence meant my business would be public knowledge by noon. "Will, honey," she said, settling onto the stool next to me with surprising agility. "I saw Elena loading suitcases into her car this morning. Everything all right?" "She left me for Colin Brandt." Mrs. Derry's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. But between you and me, this isn't exactly shocking news." "What do you mean?" "I've seen her car at his place 3-4 times a week for months, always parked around back like she was trying to hide it. And the way she's been acting at the grocery store, all secretive phone calls and new clothes." She patted my arm sympathetically. "A woman my age notices things." Frankie leaned forward. "What else have you noticed, Mrs.?" Well, last week I was walking past Colin's house, you know, the one with all those big windows, and I saw them through the living room window. They were, well, let's just say they weren't discussing real estate." The whiskey was making me bold. "How long do you think this has been going on?" "Months, honey. Maybe longer. And it's not just Colin either." My blood went cold. "What?" "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Elena's been entertaining quite a few clients at those late-night showings. My neighbor Sarah works at the title company, and she says Elena's been using the same empty house on Maple Street for months. Different men, same routine." The room spun slightly. It was one thing to lose your wife to another man, but to discover she'd been running her own personal escort service using real estate as cover was something else entirely. Jesus Christ. Language, Will, Mrs. Derry chided gently. But yes, it's a mess. The whole town's been talking about it. We were all wondering when you'd figure it out. I drained my whiskey and signaled for another. So I'm the last to know. Perfect. Not the last, Frankie said quietly. Colin doesn't know about the others. Something shifted inside me then. The hurt and humiliation were still there, but underneath them was something harder, colder. Elena thought I was nothing, boring and predictable. Maybe it was time to show her just how wrong she could be. Frankie, you still have contacts at the police department? Sure, why? I want to know everything about Colin Brandt. Financial records, business dealings, parking tickets, everything. Mrs. Derry smiled approvingly. Now you're talking, honey. That woman needs to learn she can't just walk all over people. I pulled out my phone and opened the Find My iPhone app. Elena and I had shared locations for years, a practical arrangement for a married couple. She'd probably forgotten about it in her rush to freedom. The little dot showing Elena's location pulsed steadily from Colin's address. She's at his place right now, I said, showing Frankie the screen. What are you thinking, Will? I finished my second whiskey and stood up, feeling steadier than I had in hours. I'm thinking Elena wants a war, and I'm going to give her one she'll never forget. The old me would have gone home and sulked, maybe hired a lawyer and quietly divided our assets. The old me was boring and predictable, but the old me was dead. Elena had killed him with her casual cruelty and her cold dismissal of 15 years together. What was left was something harder, something that had learned to investigate and dig and find the truth, even when people didn't want it found. Mrs. D, you said Elena's been using that empty house on Maple Street? 1247 Maple. Big Colonial, been on the market for 8 months? And you're sure about Colin not knowing about the other men? Positive. He thinks he's her one true love. Poor fool. I smiled for the first time since finding that text message. Then it's time Colin learned the truth about his girlfriend. And time Elena learned what happens when you underestimate boring, predictable Will Archer. Colin Brandt's Tesla Model S sat in his driveway like a monument to his own ego. Pristine white with vanity plates reading, Tech Guy. I'd been watching his house for 3 hours, parked down the street in my beat-up Ford pickup waiting for the right moment. Elena's car was gone. According to the Find My iPhone app, she was across town at an emergency showing. More likely another rendezvous, but that worked in my favor. I'd spent the morning doing research, using skills I hadn't needed since my journalism days. Colin Brandt, age 42, founder of Brandt Digital Solutions, a company that seemed to exist primarily to manage other people's social media accounts. His LinkedIn profile was full of buzzwords like synergy and disruption, and his Instagram was a carefully curated collection of gym selfies and expensive toys. The man was a walking midlife crisis with a credit score. I waited until he left for his daily CrossFit session. Apparently, routine was important to Colin, even if respecting other people's marriages wasn't. Then made my move. The fish came from Murphy's bait shop. 3 pounds of the ripest, most pungent specimens Murphy had in stock. Going fishing, Will? He'd asked. Something like that, I'd replied. Breaking into Colin's car wasn't actually breaking. I'd learned from Frankie that Colin had a habit of leaving his Tesla unlocked in his own driveway, trusting in the car's high-tech security system and his upscale neighborhood's low crime rate. The door handle extended as I approached, and I slipped inside. The interior was all white leather and touchscreen displays, the kind of ostentatious minimalism that screamed, "I have money and no taste." I popped the trunk from the inside and deposited my aromatic cargo, sealing the fish inside a gym bag I'd found in Colin's back seat, a gym bag that, according to the monogrammed towel inside, belonged to Elena. Phase 2 involved a tube of industrial adhesive and Colin's door locks. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to ensure he'd need professional help getting into his precious car. I was back in my truck, parked safely down the street, when Colin returned from his workout. Even from a distance, I could see his confusion as he approached the Tesla, and the handle didn't extend. He tried his key fob, then his phone app, growing more agitated by the minute. When he finally called a locksmith, I drove home with the satisfaction of a job well done. But I was just getting started. That evening, I paid a visit to Elena's best friend, Bridget Walsh. She lived in a tidy ranch house on the good side of town, the kind of place Elena aspired to before she decided to trade up to Colin's modern monstrosity. Will. Bridget seemed genuinely surprised to see me on her doorstep. I heard about... I'm so sorry. Can I come in? I think there are some things you should know about Elena. Bridget's living room was decorated in what I called real estate chic, neutral colors, generic art, and furniture that looked like it came from a staging warehouse. We sat on her beige sofa while I laid out everything Mrs. Derry had told me about Elena's extracurricular activities. Multiple men? Bridget's voice rose an octave. Are you sure? Mrs. Derry saw them. Different cars at the Maple Street house, different men going in and out. Elena's been running her own private escort service, using real estate showings as cover. Bridget's face went through several emotions: shock, disgust, and finally, anger. That bitch. She told me Colin was her soulmate, that she'd never been happier. She made me cover for her, lie to you about where she was. She used you. She used all of us. Bridget stood up, pacing to the window. Do you know how many times I lied for her? How many stories I had to remember about late showings and difficult clients? I'm sorry she put you in that position. Don't apologize, Will. You're the victim here. She turned back to me, eyes blazing. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to make sure Colin knows exactly what kind of woman he's stolen from me. And I'm going to make sure Elena learns what happens when you underestimate someone. Bridget smiled, a cold, calculating expression I'd never seen on her face before. How can I help? By the time I left Bridget's house, I had a co-conspirator and a wealth of information about Elena's recent activities. Bridget had been Elena's confidant for years, and Elena had been careless with her secrets, assuming her best friend's loyalty was absolute. She'd been wrong about that too. The next morning, I called Colin's office. His secretary, a cheerful woman named Janet, was happy to chat. Oh, Mr. Brandt's having such a terrible week, she confided. First his car, and now he's getting all these strange calls. Strange calls? Anonymous tips about his girlfriend. Someone keeps calling to say she's been seen with other men. Mr. Brandt's beside himself. I expressed appropriate sympathy and hung up, smiling. Bridget had been busy, but the real masterstroke came that afternoon. I'd driven to Colin's office building, a converted warehouse that housed several small tech companies and creative agencies. His Tesla was parked in its assigned spot, looking pristine again after yesterday's locksmith visit. I didn't touch the car this time. Instead, I waited in the lobby until Colin emerged from the elevator, looking harried and checking his phone constantly. Colin Brandt? He looked up, wary. Yes? Will Archer. Elena's husband. His face went pale. Look, I don't want any trouble. Neither do I. I kept my voice calm, reasonable. I just want to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Elena and I are in love. Are you? Because according to multiple witnesses, Elena's been in love with quite a few men lately. That's not true. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Bridget had provided. Elena leaving the Maple Street house with a man who definitely wasn't Colin. This was taken last Tuesday. While you thought she was with you, she was actually with him. Colin stared at the photo, his face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally, rage. Where did you get this? Elena's not as careful as she thinks. There are more photos, Colin. Lots more. Different men, different days. Your girlfriend's been very busy. You're lying. Am I? Why don't you ask her about the Maple Street house? Ask her about her late-night showings. Ask her about the gym bag in your car, the one that's been in other men's cars, too. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Colin? Next time you steal someone's wife, make sure she's worth stealing. I walked away, leaving him standing in the lobby with his world crumbling around him. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. Elena thought I was nothing. She was about to learn exactly what nothing could do when it had nothing left to lose. The call came at 2 in the morning. Elena's voice was shrill with panic, cutting through my bourbon-induced haze like a fire alarm. What did you tell Colin? I sat up in bed, our bed, which still smelled like her perfume despite the fact that she'd been gone for a week. Good morning to you too, Elena. Don't play games with me, Will. Colin is acting crazy. He's accusing me of cheating on him with other men. Imagine that. This isn't funny. He went through my phone, my car, everything. He found the key to the Maple Street house and demanded to know why I had it. I smiled in the darkness. And what did you tell him? The truth. That it's a listing property I use for showings. But he won't believe me. Maybe because it's not the truth. Silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of 15 years of marriage and 1 week of bitter reality. You bastard, she whispered finally. You've been following me. I didn't have to. This town's smaller than you think, Elena. People see things. People talk. Mrs. Derry, that old bitch has been spying on me. Mrs. Derry's not the only one. Bridget's been very helpful too. Another silence, longer this time. When Elena spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculated. Bridget wouldn't betray me. Wouldn't she? You used her, Elena. Made her lie for you, cover for you. Did you really think she'd be okay with that once she learned the truth? What truth? That I fell in love with someone who isn't a boring, dead-end mill worker? The truth that you've been screwing half the town while playing the devoted girlfriend to Colin? That's not 1247 Maple Street. Tuesday afternoons with the insurance agent, Thursday evenings with the bank manager, Saturday mornings with that kid from the college. What is he, 22? Young enough to be your son. Each revelation hit her like a physical blow. I could hear her breathing change, becoming shallow and panicked. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to prove it to a court, Elena. I just have to prove it to Colin, and to your clients, and to your boss at the real estate agency. You wouldn't try me. The line went dead. I set the phone aside and poured another bourbon, feeling more alive than I had in years. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I knew it would be Elena. She'd always been the type to fight face to face when cornered. I took my time answering, letting her stew on the front porch. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Colin had clearly kicked her out. Let me in. This is my house now. You made that clear when you left. Will, please. We need to talk. I stepped aside, and she pushed past me into the living room. She looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. The worn furniture we'd bought together when we were young and broke, the photos of our wedding day still hanging on the walls, the life she'd discarded so casually. Colin threw me out, she said without preamble. I'm shocked. He believes your lies about other men. They're not lies, Elena. We both know that. She whirled around to face me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Beautiful, passionate, alive with fury. Fine. Yes, there were other men, a few casual encounters, nothing serious. Colin was the only one who mattered. A few casual encounters? Elena, you were running a brothel out of that empty house. I was not. It was just... I was lonely, Will. You were always at work or watching TV or reading. We hadn't had intimacy in months before I met Colin. So it's my fault? Not your fault, but not entirely mine either. We grew apart. It happens. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself another drink, not offering her one. You know what? You're right. We did grow apart. I got comfortable, took you for granted. I accept responsibility for that. Hope flickered in her eyes. But that doesn't excuse what you did. The lying, the cheating, the way you talked to me that night you left. You're nothing, you said. No one will ever be on your side. I was angry. People say things. No, Elena. You meant every word. And now you're here because Colin kicked you out and you need somewhere to stay. Not because you love me or want to work things out, but because I'm convenient. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew I was right. Where else can I go? That's not my problem anymore. Will, please. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. Our problems? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Elena, you slept with half the town while telling your boyfriend what a loser your husband was. That's not a problem. That's a choice. I made mistakes. You made choices. And now you have to live with the consequences. She was crying now, real tears that smeared her mascara and made her look older, more fragile. A week ago, those tears would have broken my heart. Now they just made me feel empty. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you burned every bridge in town. The town? What do you mean? I smiled, and she took a step back from whatever she saw in my expression. Did you really think I'd stop with Colin? Elena, you destroyed my life, my marriage, my reputation. Did you think I'd just quietly disappear? What did you do? I told the truth. To Bridget, to Mrs. Derry, to anyone who would listen. By tomorrow, everyone in town will know exactly what kind of woman you really are. Her face went white. My job? Your boss called this afternoon. Apparently, several clients have expressed concerns about your professional conduct. Something about inappropriate behavior during house showings. You bastard. You destroyed my career. No, Elena. You destroyed your career. I just made sure people knew about it. She stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly, and I wondered if she might collapse. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and looked at me with pure hatred. You think you've won? You think ruining my life makes you the better person? I don't care about being the better person. I care about justice. This isn't justice, it's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. She walked to the door, then turned back. You know what the really sad part is, Will? I actually felt guilty about leaving you. I thought you deserved better than what I was giving you. But now I see the truth. You deserved exactly what you got. You're small and petty and vindictive, and you'll die alone in this house, surrounded by your bitterness. Maybe, but you'll die knowing that everyone in this town sees you for what you really are. She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I watched through the curtains as she got into her car and drove away, probably heading for the motel on Route 9, the only place in town that would take her now. I finished my bourbon and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in weeks. But I wasn't done with Elena yet. Not by a long shot. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the boathouse with Frankie when Jared Hoffman walked in. Colin's business partner looked like he'd aged a decade since I'd last seen him, hollow-eyed, unshaven, and carrying himself like a man who'd lost everything. Buy you a drink, Jared. He looked up, startled. Will? I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? We're both victims of Colin's poor judgment. Jared slumped onto the bar stool next to me. Bourbon, make it a double. Frankie raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I'd filled him in on my plans, and he knew when to stay quiet. Heard your business partnership dissolved, I said conversationally. Colin cleaned out our accounts and disappeared. Took everything, client files, equipment, even the coffee machine. Jared's laugh was bitter. 20 years of friendship and he screws me over for a woman who was screwing half the town. Where did he go? Florida, I think, or maybe California. He always talked about making it big in Silicon Valley. I signaled the bartender for another round. Must have been planning it for a while. Months. I found out he'd been moving money around, setting up accounts I didn't know about. The bastard used our business credit line to finance his escape. That's fraud, Jared. Try proving it. He covered his tracks well. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Colin and Elena at a restaurant in Portland, taken just 3 days ago. Maybe not as well as he thought. Jared stared at the image. How did you get this? I hired a private investigator. Turns out Colin and Elena are holed up in a fancy hotel, living off the money he stole from your business. Son of a bitch. The PI also found out they're planning to leave the country. Apparently, Colin's been in contact with some business associates in Costa Rica. No extradition treaty. Jared's face went red. He's going to get away with it. Not if we stop him first. What do you mean? I leaned closer, lowering my voice. I mean, Colin made one crucial mistake. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else, but he's not. He's predictable. I don't follow. Elena called me yesterday. She's broke. Colin's been controlling all the money, and she's getting desperate. She wants to come back to town, try to rebuild her life. So I told her I'd take her back. Forgive everything, start fresh. Frankie choked on his beer. You what? Relax, I'm not actually taking her back. But she doesn't know that. She thinks she's played me, convinced me to be her safety net while she figures out her next move. Jared was starting to understand. You're setting a trap. Elena's coming back tomorrow night. She thinks she's going to sweet-talk me into reconciliation while secretly planning to rejoin Colin once he gets the Costa Rica thing sorted out. How do you know all this? Because I know Elena. She always has a backup plan, and she always underestimates everyone around her. I pulled out a small recording device. She's been very chatty on the phone. Told me all about Colin's plans, their money situation, even their exact location. Jesus. The best part? She doesn't know I've been recording our conversations. Everything she's told me about Colin's financial crimes, their plans to flee the country, even her own involvement in moving the stolen money, it's all on tape. Jared's eyes lit up. That's evidence. Enough to put Colin away for years. And Elena too, as an accomplice. Why are you helping me? Colin stole your wife. I finished my bourbon and stood up. Because Elena was right about one thing. I am predictable. And predictably, I believe in justice. The next evening, I waited in my living room for Elena's return. She'd called that morning crying and apologetic, begging for another chance. She'd learned her lesson, she said. Colin had turned out to be a monster who controlled and manipulated her. She just wanted to come home. It was almost convincing. She arrived at 8 p.m. sharp, carrying a single suitcase and wearing a conservative dress I recognized from our early marriage. She'd even toned down her makeup, trying to look like the woman I'd fallen in love with, instead of the predator she'd become. Will. She stood in the doorway like a supplicant, eyes downcast. Thank you for seeing me. Come in. She moved carefully through the house, touching familiar objects like she was reacquainting herself with a previous life. It looks exactly the same. I'm not much for redecorating. I missed this place. Missed you. I gestured to the couch. Sit down. We need to talk. She perched on the edge of the cushions, hands folded in her lap. I know I have a lot to make up for. Tell me about Colin. Her face twisted with what looked like genuine pain. He's not the man I thought he was. He's controlling, paranoid. He monitors my phone, my emails, everything. I feel like a prisoner. Where is he now? Portland. We've been staying at the Eastland Park Hotel, but he's barely let me out of the room. Why? He thinks you're having us followed. He's convinced you're going to have him arrested or something. I kept my expression neutral. Am I? I don't know. Are you? That depends on what you tell me. She leaned forward, eyes bright with what she probably thought was sincerity. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I just want this nightmare to be over. Start with the money. What money? The money Colin stole from his business partner. Her mask slipped for just a moment. I don't know anything about that. Elena, if we're going to rebuild our marriage, we need honesty between us. She was quiet for a long moment, calculating. Finally, she sighed. Colin did take money from the business. But it wasn't stealing. He said it was his share, that Jared was trying to cheat him. How much money? About $200,000. He moved it to accounts in Florida and the Cayman Islands. And you helped him? I just signed some papers. I didn't know what they were for. Lies, but useful lies. I kept the recording device in my pocket running. What's the plan now? Colin wants to leave the country. He has contacts in Costa Rica who can help us start over. Us. She reached across the space between us and took my hand. That's what I told him. But Will, I don't want to run away. I want to stay here, with you. I want to fix what I broke. Her hand was warm and familiar, and for just a moment I remembered what it felt like to love her. Then I remembered her words from that night she left. You're nothing. And the moment passed. What about the other men? She flinched. That's over. All of it. You're the only man I want. Even the college kid, especially him. God, Will, I don't know what I was thinking. It was like I was having some kind of breakdown. We talked for another hour, Elena spinning an elaborate story about manipulation and coercion, painting herself as Colin's victim rather than his accomplice. She was good. I had to give her that. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her. Finally, she moved closer on the couch, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Can you forgive me? I don't know. This is a lot to process. I understand. But Will, we don't have much time. Colin expects me back tomorrow night. If I don't show up, he'll come looking for me. Then maybe you should go back to him. Panic flashed in her eyes. No. I can't. He's dangerous when he's angry. Please, Will, let me stay here. At least until we figure out what to do. What about the Costa Rica plan? I'll tell him I changed my mind, that I can't go through with it. He'll be angry, but he won't hurt me if I'm here with you. I pretended to consider it. All right. You can stay tonight. But Elena, if we're going to make this work, no more lies, no more secrets. No more lies, she agreed, leaning in to kiss me. I let her, tasting the familiar sweetness of her lips and the bitter knowledge of her betrayal. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with triumph. She thought she'd won, thought she'd played me perfectly. She had no idea that every word she'd spoken was being recorded, or that Jared and the FBI were already on their way to Portland to arrest Colin. By morning, Elena would learn what happened when you underestimated boring, predictable Will Archer. But first, I was going to let her think she'd won. It would make her fall that much harder. Elena was still asleep when the FBI called at 6 a.m. Agent Sarah Martinez spoke in the clipped professional tone of someone who'd been up all night. Mr. Archer, we have Colin Brandt in custody. Your recordings were instrumental in securing the arrest warrant. I stepped out onto the back porch, not wanting to wake Elena. What about the money? We're working on asset recovery now. Mr. Hoffman should get most of his funds back, though it'll take time. And Elena? We'll need her to come in for questioning. Based on your recordings, she's implicated in the money laundering scheme. I understand. Mr. Archer, I want you to know that what you did took courage. Not many people would have gone to these lengths to see justice done. After I hung up, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table waiting. Elena emerged 20 minutes later, wearing one of my old t-shirts and looking younger than she had in years. "Morning," she said, kissing the top of my head like we were still married. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby." She poured herself coffee and sat across from me, studying my face. "You seem different this morning." "Do I?" "Calmer. More like the old Will." "Maybe I am." She smiled, the genuine smile I'd fallen in love with, not the calculated expression she'd worn for the past few years. "I'm glad. I was worried you might have second thoughts about taking me back. Elena, we need to talk." Her smile faltered. "That sounds ominous." "Colin was arrested this morning." The color drained from her face. "What?" "FB, I got him at the hotel. Charges include wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of business assets." She stood up so quickly her chair fell over. "How do you know this?" "Because I helped them build the case." "You what?" I pulled out the recording device and set it on the table between us. "Every conversation we've had since you left has been recorded. Every lie you told, every detail about Colin's crimes, every admission of your own involvement. It's all here." She stared at the device like it was a snake. "You bastard. The FBI will want to speak with you. I'd recommend getting a lawyer. You set me up. You made me think you wanted me back, and you set me up. I did exactly what you did to me. I lied to get what I wanted." She was shaking now, with rage or fear or both. "What do you want?" "Money?" "You know I don't have any." "I don't want your money, Elena." "Then what?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where we'd once planned to build a deck and plant a garden. Dreams from a different life, when I thought we had a future together. "I want you to understand something," I said without turning around. "You told me I was nothing, that no one would ever be on my side, that I was boring and predictable and forgettable. Will, you were wrong. I had people on my side. My father, Frankie, Mrs. Derry, even Bridget once she learned the truth about you. And yes, I am predictable. Predictably loyal, predictably honest, and predictably determined to see justice done." I turned back to face her. "But I'm not nothing, Elena. And I'm not forgettable. You're going to remember me for the rest of your life." She was crying now, but these weren't the manipulative tears she'd used to try to win me back. These were the tears of someone who'd finally realized the full scope of their mistakes. "I loved you," she whispered. "No, you didn't. You loved what I represented. Stability, security, someone who would always be there to clean up your messes. But you never loved me." "That's not true." "If it's not true, then why did you throw me away so easily? Why did you humiliate me, mock me, make me feel worthless?" She had no answer for that. "You know what the really sad part is?" I continued. "I would have forgiven you. If you'd come to me honestly, admitted your mistakes, asked for help, I would have taken you back, because despite everything, I did love you." "Do you still?" I considered the question seriously. "No. I don't think I do. You killed that love with your cruelty." The doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see two people in dark suits standing on my porch. "That'll be the FBI." Elena looked around the kitchen like a trapped animal. "Will, please, don't let them take me." "I can't stop them, Elena. And I wouldn't if I could. I'll go to prison. Maybe. Probably. You were an accessory to multiple federal crimes. My life is over. Your old life is over. Maybe prison will give you time to figure out who you want to be next." The doorbell rang again. Elena straightened her shoulders, and for a moment I saw a flash of the strength that had first attracted me to her. "I suppose I should get dressed." "That would be appropriate." She started toward the stairs, then paused. "Will?" "I am sorry. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry." "I know you are. but sorry doesn't undo the damage. She nodded and went upstairs. I answered the door and let the agents in, offering them coffee while they waited. Agent Martinez was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "This must be difficult for you," she said. "It's necessary. Still, turning in your own wife takes strength. Ex-wife. The divorce papers were filed yesterday." Elena came downstairs 15 minutes later, dressed in the same conservative outfit she'd worn the night before. She'd done her makeup carefully, trying to hide the evidence of her tears. "Mrs. Archer?" Agent Martinez stood. "I'm Agent Martinez, FBI. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding the Colin Brandt investigation. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but I would strongly advise you to contact an attorney." Elena looked at me one last time. "Goodbye, Will." "Goodbye, Elena." I watched through the window as they helped her into the back of their sedan. She didn't look back. After they left, I called Frankie and my father, letting them know it was over. Then I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out what came next. The phone rang an hour later. It was Jared Hoffman. "Will? I just heard about the arrests. I can't thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You could have just walked away, let Colin disappear with my money. Instead, you helped me get justice. We helped each other. What will you do now?" I looked around the house, at the wedding photos I needed to take down, the furniture that held too many memories, the life I needed to rebuild from scratch. I'm thinking about selling this place. Maybe moving somewhere new. Fresh start? Something like that. After I hung up, I walked through the house one more time, saying goodbye to 15 years of marriage. In the bedroom, I found a note Elena had left on her pillow. "Will, you were right about everything. I hope someday you can find someone who deserves your loyalty. E." I folded the note and put it in my wallet, not sure why I wanted to keep it. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment in Portland, working as an investigative reporter for the city paper. Elena had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for her role in Colin's schemes. Colin himself got 8 years. I never visited Elena in prison, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was taking college courses and working in the prison library. Maybe she was figuring out who she wanted to be next. As for me, I was learning to be alone without being lonely. I'd started dating a librarian named Kate, who thought my stories about small-town revenge were fascinating rather than disturbing. She had kind eyes and a quick laugh, and she'd never once called me boring or predictable. On quiet evenings, I sometimes thought about Elena's parting words, that I'd die alone, surrounded by my bitterness. She'd been wrong about that too. I wasn't bitter anymore. Justice had burned the bitterness out of me, leaving something cleaner behind. I'd kept my promise to myself. Elena would remember me for the rest of her life, not as the nothing she'd discarded, but as the man who'd held her accountable for her choices. And that, I thought, was justice enough.